This remarkable looking machine is an Alpine GTA. Launched in 1984, production ran until 1995, but they didn't sell very many. It's a Renault engine, Peugeot Renault Volvo V6 up at the back. It's a plastic body. It is an extraordinary car with the most extraordinary windscreen wipers you'll perhaps ever see. But it's a lot more than just that. So let's have a look at this absolute beauty. So until pretty much around the time of the launch of this car, Alpine was an independent sports car manufacturer in France. Always huge links to Renault. It was Jean Redel who ran Alpine, and he took humble saloon car mechanicals and turned them into something magical. It was his forte, and he did a range of sports cars that all had rear engines, just like the Renault 4CV, the Renault 8, the Renault 10 saloons, and were formidable in terms of hill climbing, in terms of motorsport. But increasingly, as the company aged, it knew it had to develop road cars. We've already driven an Alpine A310, which was their first serious, I think, attempt to have a grand touring car. This is that car's replacement. So this came along in 1984. The eagle-eyed will already have spotted that this is right-hand drive, so that was a key change with this model. There is the Alpine badge, and just like the 310, we've got some covered headlamps going on, and it's all very dramatic. Look at these insane windscreen wipers. Because the Alpine name was already used by Talbot in the UK, these were never badged or never sort of presented really as Alpines. Instead, they are Renault GTA V6s. So it's a 2849cc V6 engine here at the back. You could get a 2.5 turbo. That had about 200 brake horsepower. This is around 158. But it's the dramatic styling that really makes these cars. They're presented very much as a rival to the Porsche 911. And that's a tough challenge for any car. But this one certainly has plenty of drama around it. Let's start with a peek at that engine. We must enter the car this way. We press the button. The door lock is in the body, not in the door. So when you operate this button, it electronically operates the release here. This is your emergency get out if that fails. That is a mechanical release. But we pop the engine cover glass first of all, so we get some sort of rearward visibility. Oh, very, very warm in here. And then we should be able to lift this. I have to be a bit careful because it is so very, very hot. And here is the V6 engine right behind the rear axle line. Just like the A310 I drove, this has had a Holley carburetor conversion from the original Solex. I think certainly on the A310 you had two Solex carburetors, one a double choke, one a single choke. I don't know what the original setup was on these, but this one is now running a Holley, much the same, which is why we've got this big chrome pancake filter. Coolant runs all the way to the front mounted radiator, and it goes through a Renault sourced 5-speed gearbox used in the Renault 30. Incidentally, this strange door mechanism is why the unlock knob is actually next to the rear window for the front doors. But if we go down here, we can pull that lever, and then we can lift the frunk. Squeeze in here. There's that little wiper cover coming off, and there is not a lot, but there is some storage here at the front. It's also your fuel filler over there. The battery is accessible there, and it did have air conditioning, this example, when it was brand new. Sadly, it's now inoperable, which is a bit of a shame because it's absolutely roasting today. But yeah, you could get an overnight bag in there, but to be honest, I think you're better off using the rear seats for storage. So now I think we can clamber aboard. Oh, and it's certainly a low-slung sports car, and just like in the Alpine A310, the header rail is very close to the top of your head. I thought they might try and do something about that for the replacement version, but no, it's very much like that. Perhaps because you are sitting quite far forward in the chassis, which means you do get massive wheel arch extrusion. Sandal alert. I might have to take my sandals off for driving because it's all a bit congested. I can rest my foot behind the clutch pedal, not next to it. Because it's a Renault, effectively we've got the same head unit with graphic equalizer that we saw in the Espace I drove. Sadly inoperable in this example, so if you know how to fix one of these, do let us know. It should use this clock as a display apparently. Stubby gear lever for the 5-speed gearbox, the heater controls here, air conditioning if it worked there, recirculation, fog lights, and that's your trip computer. We've got coolant temperature, oil pressure, and I think that's oil level, so that presumably only works when you put the ignition on. So let's see, if I pop the ignition on, do we get an oil readout? No, that doesn't seem to be working. Typical. So yeah, we've got a trip computer, but that's not working very well, and it's very hard to see even when it's not a really sunny day. Most of the functions seem to be inoperable, but that's fine. Row warning lights over here even warn me if my lights are on. Look at that. And there's my main beam. I think that's quite funky. We've got radio controls here, the typical Renault stalk. Heated rear window, central locking, which doesn't work. Hazard lights. Proper indicator noises. Now, true to typical Alpines, there is a backbone chassis, and this centre console runs the full length of the interior. We've got some storage above it for various things. Oh, that's Renault branded. What's that? I have no idea what's in there. Quite interesting. There's another little cubby here for your various goodies. There's a glove box over here, bit of a stretch, but there we go, a bit more space in there. It's a nice place to sit. These seats are so comfortable, and look at the bolster support on them. Head restraints non-adjustable. Rear seats look appalling, to be honest. They are a bit better than the A310, but I'd still say that's kiddies only, and a bit claustrophobic with that tiny side window. And all the more so because you've got this backbone chassis coming through, and the gearbox will be there as well. But yeah, there's a bit more space than the 310, but really that is your extra storage space. Incidentally, look, we've got the original brochure, well, not the brochure, the owner's manual, which appears to actually be in, oh no, it's all languages. There we go. The controls in terms of stalks, straight out of any production Renault. So we turn for that, oh, good horn there. We've got wipers over this side. So yeah, it's a strange driving position, but it's not unpleasant. You kind of get used to the proximity of the header rail. It's a right hand handbrake as well. There's just space to get down there and get it past the part of the door there. But I suppose you really want to know what this car sounds like, which we should probably demonstrate. Here we go then. We'll see if it'll start with no throttle. It might not. Sounds quite rough and raughty out here. That's a stark contrast to how it feels on the move, as we shall find out. Yeah, proper angry V6 noises. It's not a particularly powerful engine. I mean, 158 brake horsepower from 2.8 litres. Nothing really to write home about. But it's got very strong torque characteristics. But unlike most sports cars, maximum power is actually delivered at 5,750 RPM. Exactly the same as a Citroën 2CV. Very French. Oh, there is no way I'm waiting to the end of the video for this. Let's see if we can operate the windscreen washers and take in these crazy wipers that sort of just overlap. It's yeah, it's just bizarre. I mean, they leave this bit of water right down the middle of the window, but yeah, it's a very eccentric movement. You think they're going to hit? They're not going to hit. They're going to hit? They're not going to hit. Utterly bizarre. Oh, I can't help myself. Look at it. What were they thinking? Madness. I will say the ride is actually a bit disappointing, you know. I think it's a bit firmer than the 310. The 310 was remarkably soft and composed. I've got to choose my line very carefully coming out of this car park, and then we can actually get out on the road. And I assume that's 60, the speedometer stopped working then. just to add a bit of fun to our progress. Yeah, it's much smoother than you expect. The A310, I'm gonna have to do the windows up a bit, it's just too noisy. But I drove, I think that had a rortier exhaust to it. This seems a fair bit smoother. Sorry, I'm just playing around with the controls, trying to get some ventilation going on. Yeah, that's as much as I'm getting apparently. But just like the 310, settle back, and this thing is the consummate cruising machine. It's so comfortable, and it does ride well. Although it is firmer, it does feel also pretty well damped and composed, which is what you want in a car such as this. Top speed, I believe, is 146 miles an hour. 0 to 60 time officially 8 seconds. I think it's 7 seconds for the turbo, which will go on over 150 miles an hour. But yeah, I've been waiting to drive one of these for a very long time. They're always a car that fascinated me. I have a feeling one starred in Howard's Way, a TV program when I was a child. Towards the end of production, it evolved into the A610, which had conventional windscreen wipers. Shock horror. But I have to say, there's some serious pose value with this car. I think it just looks so striking, especially in this beautiful red metallic. This isn't the best example in the world. There's a bit of fairly typical lacquer peel going on, just the same as Renault Espaces and the like. But yeah, I like driving cars like this. This car gets used. It's not a show queen that only comes out on lovely days. Specialist support for these can be tricky. Parts supply can be very tricky. There's some cracked and broken elements to the plastic on the outside of this car, and where on earth are you going to find replacements? That is a genuine struggle. I think just as much as when these were new, these are a car you really had to want. You were turning down some extraordinarily competent rivals from Porsche, not just the 911, the 944s as well. So you were making a very bold statement, and you ended up with a car which had Renault switchgear and Renault badges here in the UK. This wasn't exotic in those terms, which is an unfair reflection on the car really, because Jean Redel and his team did amazing things. The construction of these cars is quite interesting. The backbone chassis apparently made by Hurliers, who made BX Estates. They did the folding roof Peugeots of the early 2000s. Sadly lost to us now, but Hurliers was quite the company. Did a lot of interesting conversions and chassis work, it seems. It's a galvanized backbone chassis. It's a plastic body, so in theory these cars are rust proof, but they do take a bit of specialist knowledge to keep them going, and that can be very difficult to find. Yeah, this just feels so special. It doesn't really matter about the performance, which is good, because the performance isn't that strong really. Yes, these cars are light, and 0 to 60 in 8 seconds sounds quick, but it's geared much more for cruising than acceleration, so it doesn't actually feel all that rapid, even when you finally get a chance to give it the beans on a national speed limit road. But what there is in absolute abundance is torque. So we're doing 40 miles an hour, 2000 revs up a pretty steep hill. I am barely tickling the throttle. I don't know whether the Holly unleashes a few more horses than the original Solex setup. Perhaps it does. I will say this engine really comes, it almost feels quite cammy. As the revs build, it gets above 4,000. It seems to develop quite the persona. Don't worry, we'll find suitable roads in a minute. There are 60 mile an hour speed limits around here somewhere, I'm sure of it. So, I mean, just like a Porsche, it's very well mannered. It's very docile. It's not exotic in a way that makes you scared to drive it around a little village like this. Visibility is absolutely excellent. The blind spots are minimal. There's actually really good visibility out the back. Yeah, the steering's just lovely. Rack and pinion, unassisted. It doesn't need assistance. The parking speed's maybe a little heavy, but you're not doing parking speeds very often. Oh yes. That is all the right noises right there. Speedometer's stopped working. I've no idea how fast I'm going. Oh, there we go. We've got some speedometer again. I think the phrase is because French. It does rev very nicely all the way to 6. Oh my god, that was a big deer. We shall slow down in case it has friends. That is always a danger around here. There are many deer in the forests and an awful lot of collisions because of them. I'm not going to talk about understeer and oversteer on a dry public road. I would have to be driving like an absolute maniac to unseat this car in these conditions. This is a road car, so I'm going to test it as per the road. And yeah, it's just nicely brisk, makes nice noises, but is composed and comfortable in a way you perhaps don't expect. Oh yes, that is creamy. Hasn't got any harshness to it at all. It probably sounds quite impressive from outside, but from in here, oh, and that novelty of having the all the noise behind you, very evocative of a 911 or a Skoda with a K-series engine. Have you seen that test yet? You probably want to check that one out. Yeah, this is just lovely. It's sublime. The clutch is quite heavy, so I don't think you'd want to drive it around town too often. But this car just eats up miles. That really is what it was designed to do, and it does it so very, very well. Now, these cars sold in very few numbers in the UK, but I know for a time there was definitely quite a few of them doing the old hill climbing. I saw quite a few of them at Prescott back in the day, and it was quite interesting. The naturally aspirated ones, tweaked up a bit, made such a blood-curdling noise, whereas the turbochargers take away the exhaust note, and mostly what you hear is whooshing, and you just see this rocket ship launching itself up the hill. Beautiful cars to watch because they're so low slung and pretty. Oh yes, the Alpine heritage is very, very pure in these cars. It's just so deliciously, so unmistakably French. And I know some people think I keep going because French is an insult. That's not the case at all. Yes, there's some French things like the fit and finish of stuff is terrible in places, and the lack appeal is very typically French. It affects a lot of French cars, but the French also know about beauty. They know about beguiling. They know about suspension, how to make suspension both comfortable but not at the cost of handling. There's many aspects of French engineering I simply adore, and they're often outside the box, we don't care what anyone else is thinking way of doing things that I like so much. Oh, this car is a joy. Returning to more boring business, the drag coefficient when you're not driving around with the windows open is a mightily impressive 0.28 coefficient of drag. That is low. The turbo is 0.3. It isn't quite so slippery. So I imagine if you're not absolutely hoofing it everywhere, you can probably get reasonable economy out of this car. The frontal area is so low. So a properly practical sports car, maybe, sort of. Oh wow, sometimes they say never meet your heroes, but I'm very glad I have in this case. I've always wanted to drive one of these cars, and it's just as exciting, just as fabulous as I thought it would be. It isn't a one-trick pony either. It isn't just about going as quickly as possible. That's not a sports car I would like. You can just cruise around in this and feel oh so special because it's so very different. It isn't for everyone, I fully accept that. You have to have a bit of the because French worship in you. It is so very French. Some people might not like that awful Renault switchgear. It just doesn't feel quite at home in such a special car. I don't care. I just like the noise and how it looks and how it goes. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can head to the Hubnut store, buy lovely merchandise if you wish. And otherwise I shall see you in a future video. Farewell. Oh, this is one I really don't want to give back.